Good morning. I am Steve Weber. Welcome to the American Gumption Morning Show. Thinking I'm having a little bit of lag time issues with my connection, so not happy with it. Not sure what is the issue, but hopefully it's going to be okay. Although I don't have a lot of confidence. I should probably just stop the show and start all over again, do a computer restart, and bring it back in live because something doesn't seem quite right. Anyway, I'm not sure what I'm going to do. Let me I don't know what I'm going to do. I haven't decided yet. Alrighty. Well, anyway, today is Thursday, February 25th. Andrew Hesbacher returns to the American Gumption Morning Show, and I've got a monologue, Journeys. So that's coming right up. I'm not sure, Andrew. If you can hear me, give me a thumbs up if it's going good or if it's not going good. Does it sound like it's coming through clear? It's hesitant. Okay. All right. Thank you. Here's what I'm going to do. I'm just going to stop this broadcast and I'm going to restart it. Actually, what I'll do is I'll just disappear for a second, do a Chrome restart, do a computer restart. So there's going to be blank silence. This is not good broadcasting. Here, actually, what I could do is I could bring Andrew on right now while I disappear and let him just begin the story and ad lib for a minute or two. So let's just do that.
Hello, world. My name's Andrew.
Hey, Andrew. So anyway, I'm feeling like ever since it just doesn't feel right. And so I think I need to restart my computer. So what I think we ought to let you do is we won't do an official introduction until I get back with it. But why don't you just tell people a little bit about the time that we spent back on September 25th, which when you were in Kansas, and you could just tell people about the beginning of your journey and a little bit about that, and then we'll pick it up after that. How's that sound?
Sure, sounds good.
All right, I'm going to put you in charge. Andrew is in charge of the American Gumption Morning Show. We'll throw him right into the main screen here, and then I'll be back in about 2 or 3 minutes, I hope. So thank you, Andrew. Take it away.
No problem. Hello, everyone. My name is Andrew Hesbacher, the new host of the American Gumption Morning Show. I'm stepping in for Steve while there's some technical difficulties. As some of you may or may not know, I am actually Steve's, I believe, second cousin. He and my mom are first cousins, so I think we're first cousin once removed. I don't know those details, but yes. So both of us are travelers, and in the late summer and fall of 2020, I rode my bike all the way across America, and I was on the show, as he said, on September 25th. While I was still on the trip, I was in Kansas at the time. I had actually just left Kansas City the day before. So I was in eastern Kansas I believe the town was called Silver Lake, very small town, off of, I believe, Route 34 in Kansas, US Route 34. And up to that time, I had really just been biking, pedaling my way across the country, halfway across the country. I was a few days away from the geographic center of the United States. At that point, I had already biked roughly, I want to say, 1,700, 1,800 miles, which is roughly about half of the journey that I had taken. I started on the coast of New Jersey, in Belmar, New Jersey. And I'm from Philadelphia. That's where I am right now in my house. Outside, you can see the Phillies jerseys, memorabilia, and such around. Big Phillies fans in this house. Spent my first night in this house, and then kept on going. Made my way through Pennsylvania, dipped into Maryland and even West Virginia for a day. Rode up the Potomac River, and then eventually crossed back into Pennsylvania. Made it through Pittsburgh, through Ohio, through Indiana. Stopped in Chicago, where I got a visit from my family. And had a lot of fun getting to see some friends that live in the area as well. It was really, and then went through Illinois, through St. Louis, across Missouri on the Katy Trail, and ended up in Kansas City. And then the next day had this call with Steve here. And that first half was really just an epic journey. And I, in a way, kind of say I was getting my sea legs. The first 2 weeks of the trip were just training period, really, just learning the ins and outs of this. I'd never done a trip like this before, never really done even any serious camping before. The most I had done was like set up a tent like next to my house and just kind of sleep in the backyard with either myself or with my sisters. But nothing really too much more intense than that. So really the first 2 weeks to the first month was really just figuring out if I like this thing that I've committed myself to, what to do, how to do it right. Still doing a lot of research, still watching a lot of YouTube videos as I go along, just making sure, not necessarily that I'm doing everything right the way it's supposed to be done, but just that I'm staying safe and that I know what my options are to the best of my ability, and that I can, if anyone else has done similar things, that I know what's going on. So yeah, I kind of just kept on going, learned what I was doing, and made my way over to Kansas. And that's when Steve and I talked, and
I'm back.
all the story came out. And there he is.
Hey, well, here, I got a picture of your first day. Let's see if we can do this. This was the day you left New Jersey. There we go. I think that's right.
That's not from the day I left New Jersey, but from a training ride that I did in preparation for the trip. This is on the Jersey Shore. This is actually in Atlantic City. So if you can picture all those big casinos, that's what's right in front of my face at the moment.
All righty. Well, very good. So you updated people on the first part, and that was show number 38 back on September 25th when we talked, and you were somewhere about 70 miles west of Kansas City, Missouri.
Yes.
All righty. Well, very good. Well, we'll just pick up the story from there. And so at that point, you're heading towards the mountains, and you have these kind of long days of just sort of flat Kansas plains to navigate.
This is a lie, Steve. This is a lie that you've been told. This is a lie that we've all been told. Kansas is not flat. I refuse to believe this. Hills on hills on hills. Maybe the last 50 miles of Kansas were quite flat. Colorado, eastern Colorado, before you hit the mountains, that was flat. The first 100 miles of Colorado were perhaps the first 100 miles of Colorado and Ohio were the flattest roads that I rode the entire time I was on my tour. Kansas was not flat. Maybe the route that I took was not the best route for biking or something. It's one of the designated routes that the Kansas state government says on their state website, but it is not flat, especially when you're going east to west and you have the wind in your face and you're dealing with hills. Kansas was one of the, I tell people Kansas is where the mental got harder than the physical, because I just had wind in my face. I still had these big hills, not mountains, but certainly in a car, you would say relatively flat and rolling hills. But when you're on a bike, it's still strenuous. I had some of my worst days in the state of Kansas.
That was one of my questions I wanted to ask you. Was there ever a point where you just wanted to say, you know what, this just isn't any fun. It's not worth it. I can just go get on a plane and fly home, and I don't have to do this.
No, I never had that feeling. Definitely feelings of giving up momentarily, like just for the day. There, specifically one day in Kansas, actually by the geographic center of the country in this town called Smith Center. I had left the town of Downs, I believe, the day before. I'm not exactly certain, but yeah, I think my average on a day was across the whole trip was maybe 50 miles. While I was in Kansas, it was maybe more like 60 to 70 miles a day. But on this day in particular, the wind was in my face 30 to 40 miles an hour the entire day. I ended up only biking like 20 miles that day because I just could not keep going. Like the wind was so bad, I thought I was hearing police sirens in the distance. Like it was just so terrible. I could barely even hear the music that I had like from my phone, even with an earphone in. It was just terrible. Took breaks. Like it was sometimes faster for me to walk my bike than to keep on pedaling because the force of the wind was holding me back that much. But one of the lessons from my trip was I end that day in Smith Center. I say, maybe I'll keep on going. Maybe I'll just try and find a spot to camp in this town. I walk into a restaurant and some lovely older Kansas couple says, "Hey, what are you doing?" "Oh, I'm on a bike tour." "Well, do you need a place to stay?" "Yeah, I do. Do you want to come stay at our house?" So at the end of this terrible day of riding, I get the offer to have a shower and a warm house and some food to eat and some lovely conversation. So it's a give and take. And you know, had I not had all that wind, I would have been 20 miles, 30 miles past that town and never even gotten the opportunity to meet these people, who were some of the best conversation that I got to have with strangers on the trip.
Yeah, that's great. How much weight were you? I think we talked about this the first time, but remind me and refresh. You know, people who are just hearing this interview, how much weight were you typically carrying on your bike? What was sort of the average?
So when I started my trip, I never got a full exact weight measurement. When I started my trip, I want to say I was probably close to 70 pounds of gear. Now, granted, none of that is on my body. Like the only stuff that's on my body is my clothes and my helmet, right? Everything else, I had 2 big pannier bags. My tent sat on the back of my rack. I had a saddle bag. I had a front handlebar bag. But all in all, when I first started, it was probably about 70 pounds. And then by the time I got to Kansas, I had already dropped quite a bit of my gear, either sent it back or maybe traded things out, whatever happened, that I was probably down to the mid 50s. And then by the end of the trip, I actually, when I got to Kansas City, I picked up a couple of things. And when I got to Boulder and Denver, I picked up a few more things in preparation for the mountains. I had snow when I got into not actually in Colorado, but in Utah, there was some snow, and that was just fortunate. There could have been snow. Like I was preparing for the worst, expecting the possibility of snow when I got into the Rockies. Unfortunately, I didn't. I really never had anything terrible. Even the snow that I had eventually in Utah went away pretty quickly. But yeah, I probably mid 50s in terms of pounds.
When you're riding across Kansas, okay, I get it. There's hills there. Kansas is not flat. Now you get into Colorado. At what point do you actually see the mountains? How far away were you when you finally saw them?
I'm trying to think of the name of the town. It starts with a B. I know it starts with a B, but I was, it was like the night before I made it to Denver and Boulder. So maybe as the bird flies 70 to 80 miles away from the mountain itself, and maybe only 30 to 40 miles away from Denver.
So you see these mountains, and as you're getting closer, you're coming into Denver. You know, are you thinking, okay, I gotta pedal uphill coming up soon? What was your thoughts?
I was actually really excited for the mountains. I mean, that's one of the things that was so terrible about Kansas is everyone says it's flat, and then it's not actually flat, and you have wind in your face, so it's mentally just agonizing to do it. But when you know you have to climb a mountain, you're preparing yourself the entire time to climb the mountain. So it really wasn't that bad at all. The worst climb I had to deal with wasn't until I crossed the Continental Divide at Monarch Pass. That I had like a 2-mile stretch that I had to have a pretty steep climb. But besides that, one of the glorious things about the Western United States is that a lot of it was built. The infrastructure was built after the invention of cars and trucks and vans. So the engineering of these highways and interstates was made to accommodate those vehicles. So all of the great, I tell people the Appalachians is harder to hike and to bike than the Rockies because all of these roads, all of these places in the Appalachians were made before the invention of cars. So you just walked right on up, or your horse picked you right on up the road. And it was a lot. I had a lot. It was a lot more variable, right? In the Rockies, it's like you're just climbing for miles, thousands of feet. You're going up to make it to the top of this pass. In the Appalachians, it's not. The distances aren't as great, right? But steeper for sure, harder to ride for sure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I'm thinking about watching the Tour de France. And of course, they have these really steep mountains. And of course, these guys are professional bike riders and they're not carrying any bags, but they're going up some pretty steep grades, like 7%, 8%, some 10% is always the steepest. I mean, 8 or 10% grade is pretty darn steep.
Oh, yeah. And I don't know if I had that grade going up the mountain.
Mm-hmm.
Probably something comparable to it. If not 8%, then certainly 6% at the minimum. But yeah, it was definitely tough. But like I said, when you kind of just have it in your mind that you're gonna have to climb the mountain,
Yeah.
it's really not that bad. And that was the only climb where I ever had in the Rockies where I was ever really struggling, or not even struggling, but where it was really strenuous. Where like just this one, it was, I think, 5 miles, where I was climbing like maybe 2,000 to 3,000 feet just across those 5 miles. I had to take maybe like 4 or 5 breaks just across those 5 miles. Like it took me over an hour, maybe more like an hour and a half to 2 hours just to do those 5 miles, which was pretty tough. But really anywhere else in the Rockies, like it really was not bad at all. I was pleasantly surprised at how just kind of fun it was. Yeah.
I have a couple pictures. I lost. This is part of the challenge with my computer. I lost some pictures, but I got them back. Here you are at Monarch Pass Summit, 11,312 feet. Where was that? Was that in Colorado?
Yeah. So this is just maybe 20 miles east of the town of Gunnison, Colorado. If anyone's ever heard of like a small town called Salida, cute little small town, 30 miles west of Salida. Yeah, one of them, a big pass on the Continental Divide. The Continental Divide Trail runs right through this pass. Yeah, this was that was a really great day. Just being like, I'm at the top of the United States, like not necessarily the top of the world, but that wasn't the highest I got on my trip. My dad and I hiked to the top of a mountain, and we got up to over 13,000 feet actually. On that hike, but this was the highest I got while I was biking.
But that was the highest pass you went over there. Was that like along? Well, no, you wouldn't have been on Highway 70. You would have been on some other kind of a road as you're passing.
I was on US 50. That's on US Route 50.
Okay, very good. I guess that probably is a little bit north of Highway 70.
South.
Yeah, very good. So that probably is that's pretty up and down, and that's the mountains.
Yeah, coming down from that mountain was actually terrible. I was scared. I had a lot of wind, struggled to control my bike. Like I was constantly had my hands on the brake. There were plenty of other mountains where I just flew down. Like I'm sure I was going 40 miles an hour because I just didn't have any terrible winds that were making it like a wobbly ride. But I just remember I like spent like 2 hours climbing up this mountain being like, yes, I finally made it to the top. And then I start riding down, and it's harder and scarier, more technical to ride down the mountain than it is to ride up it.
Yeah. Was there, did you have any, I know you had like some minor mechanical problems, and especially at the beginning, did you ever crash or have an incident that was, really scary on the bike?
No, only crash I ever had was while I was in Indiana, and it was taken care of right away. All my mechanical problems that I got taken care of when I was in Pittsburgh, and then Indiana after my crash, and then in Chicago, I really didn't have any other major problems. I had some upgrades. I got new pedals and then bike shoes while I was in Kansas City in preparation for the longer distances and the mountains. But beyond that, I didn't really have any serious technical problems. once I got to like the very end of the trip, I started having some wheel failure, but nothing that I hadn't seen before earlier in my trip that I knew how to fix it. And I was getting so close to the end that it really wasn't a bother.
Hmm.
So yeah, like no serious problems. I mean, I was happy that happened. I did have to spend a fortune on getting a new wheel, and a new drivetrain while I was in Pittsburgh and Chicago. So
Hmm. How about
it better have worked for the money I paid.
how about like flat tires?
I did not. I had one flat tire on like day 3.
Mm,
Um, and it wasn't really like a flat tire because I like hit something and it burst. Like
yeah,
I just had a bad tire that wasn't ready to hold up to the 70 pounds of weight that I had on the back of my bike.
gotcha. So you
So it
weren't really
burst.
you weren't really riding on skinny tires then. You had something, a pretty hefty tire that you were riding on.
They were fairly thin. They would definitely be considered road tires.
Okay.
Bikers like to have a lot of for some reason a lot of like pride in like what style of riding that they do. You can get tires as super thin, really thin road tires. Mine were like traditional hybrid bike tires, 35 millimeters wide, if that means anything to anyone out there. But I kept the same thickness, the same width, but just got a beefier tire. And then I didn't have any more problems with either of my tires. My front tire was the same original one, didn't have to replace that one. So with the one that I got replaced from the start all the way until Colorado, I did not have a single flat tire, just had to pump it up. And then people might know there are these little goat head thorns that exist out there in Colorado that I got like 3 flats in one day.
Mm,
On my day, on like the day before I was making it to Denver and Boulder, where I already had new tires waiting for me. I had
oh,
ordered new tires online, and these new tires have Kevlar in them. Like you will not get a flat. The trailers for the ads for these tires are like people riding over thumbtacks and nails and broken glass. You will not break these tires. And of course, the day before I can put them on my bike, I get 3 flats from these damn goat head thorns. And of course, it happens in the town called Last Chance,
mm.
Colorado.
Well, there you go. You when you started out, let's see. I had an idea of what I wanted to ask you. Now I'm losing my train of thought. You were not a bicycle rider to begin with, and I don't know if you shared this part while I was gone, but you were a guy who rode like 5 or 10 miles.
I was
Like
a commuter.
yeah, and then all of a
City
sudden you're
commuter.
like, yeah, I'll take this trip across the country. So suddenly, you ramp up from really doing no distance miles to like 30, 40, 50 miles a day. You said average of 50 miles a day on the trip. So what was that initial like beginning getting used to it? Once you got going, I'm sure you developed a better conditioning for it, but was it really tough at the very beginning?
The beginning was really hard. It was tough once I got to the end of my trip to like think back to how hard those first couple of weeks were. But the beginning, I decided on doing 3 days on, 1 day off. So I did 3 full riding days, and then took a 0 day, 0 miles, no biking. Just did maybe it was like a couple of miles just to get to like wherever I was, whatever hotel or motel I was trying to rest at. But yeah, so that's what I did in the beginning. And at the end of that 3rd day, or when I woke up on my rest day, like my body needed to stop. Like I would have paid a significant more amount of money to have a hotel or a motel on that day to make sure that I could just not bike and rest. And I just remember it being like calling this hostel in West Virginia that I ended up getting to stay at, being like, "Can you please take me? I'm so tired. My body is frail." And the guy did. He was so nice in Paw Paw, West Virginia. Super helpful. But that was just the first 2 weeks. Like I remember, I made it to Pittsburgh after 2 weeks exactly. left Pittsburgh. And on that day I left Pittsburgh, I got on my bike and I was like, wow, I can ride a bike. It was noticeable immediately after those first 2 weeks, just how much stronger I was and how much more my body was used to that daily output. And then by the end of the trip, my longest stretch without a break was the very end of the trip, because I was kind of rushing to make it to California in time to meet my family who was flying there. I think I went like 11 or 12 days straight without a break.
Okay. So when did you stop the 3 days riding and 1 day off routine?
After Pittsburgh. Just after this first 2 weeks. And then I probably averaged somewhere between 5 to 7 days and then a break.
So you would regularly, about roughly once a week, you'd give yourself just a full day off.
Yeah, it would either be a full day off, or I would try and time it to like, because like motels or hotels won't let you in until 11. I'd kind of try and like maximize my rest time in the hotel by like only being 10 miles away from the hotel in the morning, so I could bike there and be there ready for when they'd allow me to check in.
Right.
Kind of just like game the system as much as I could, figure out those tiny little things that I tell people, when you're in these like very highly physical situations, your body just knows. It can sense things and feel things in a way that we're just not used to when we're kind of walking around, sitting at our computers for several hours a day, driving our cars everywhere kind of life. Like the act of eating 100 calories isn't really noticeable necessarily when we're in our normal lives, but while I'm on this trip, like it was noticeable. Like all those little changes in your body is noticeable. Like the little things of just having to do 10 miles in the morning and being able to get that maximum amount of rest time actually really would change and set me up for the next day.
I really like what you just said about like 100 calories making a difference and being noticeable. You really tuned into your body energetically. You gained a whole lot of knowledge about yourself. I'm sure you never, had noticed things like that before, or maybe you did. But since you returned and finished the trip, have you been able to maintain some of that awareness that you had?
No, not at all. I mean, awareness, yes, in the terms of that I'm knowledgeable of it, and I'm maybe a bit better at kind of like tracking what I eat or realizing like what fuel, kind of realizing the connections between like what fuel I'm putting in and what like makes me feel better, or kind of what processes best in my body. But it's different because while I was on the trip, it was so noticeable because I was expending so much energy that putting 100 calories in, my body was like, oh, fuel, finally we just released 500 calories. Now we can finally take some more in. But I was not eating what one would call healthfully on this trip. Like the majority of my the majority of the trip, my morning meal was coffee and oatmeal. I would say 90% of mornings was coffee and oatmeal. And then I had some combination for lunch and dinner of ramen, like Knorr rice sides. Sometimes I'd just eat oatmeal again if that's what I had. Maybe I'd get like tortillas or bread and then like peanut butter and jelly or peanut butter and banana if I wanted something fresher. Maybe I'd buy apples or oranges or avocados for snacks and things if I really did want to try and get something fresher. But especially when I was like out in middle of nowhere, these tiny little markets, town markets, grocery stores are just not what we're used to in like what I was used to in a big city. So buying even like a loaf of bread or a pack of tortillas was like sometimes double the price that I was not buying fresh foods. Like the fresh foods were just so expensive that I was not eating what one would call healthfully. It was the majority of my calories were coming from like energy bars, like Cliff Bars or ramen or coffee or whatever. Yeah. But it was still noticeable. Like when it comes down to like, you're just pushing out so many calories that you need to take more in, your body kind of just automatically tunes into it. I was definitely looking for it a bit, kind of doing some meditating and thinking more about how my body is feeling about things. But you kind of just automatically get more in tune with how your body feels. Like it even comes like even drinking like a beer or something. A lot of people will like to have a beer at the end of a highly physical day, but knowing that I had to wake up the next morning on a day, if I would like stop at a rest stop and buy 1 or 2 beers and have them maybe like FaceTime my family or my friends before I go to bed and share a drink with them over the phone, I would wake up the next morning and feel that I had had 2 beers the night before, and it would be an extra 10 to 30 minutes to like actually get going and feel good in the next morning. To the point that I ended up just stopped drinking and doing that anymore. I did that maybe three to 5 times in the first half of the trip, and then realized by then it was like, let's not do this at all. This isn't good for my body. It's really just not helping me.
Let me share this picture here. It looks like you met some fellow adventurers somewhere in the mountains.
This is one of my favorite pictures of the whole trip. Like, it's just the colors are right, the heights are just like perfectly sloping.
Yeah,
this was one of the best days. So you might remember, best few days. You might remember earlier I said I only had to do 5 miles up this mountain, like 2,000 to 3,000 feet.
okay.
The mountain should have been more like 10 to 20 miles. But this man here in yellow, the one right next to me, his name's Shane. He runs this hostel up there, and he found me on the road. Like, when I say found me on the road, as in I was biking down US Route 50 with all my gear, and he's also an adventurer, right? He sees the gear and he kind of sees that like I'm on a trip, I'm on a journey right now, right? He's not just like, oh, that's some biker going to the next town. Like, no, it's pretty noticeable. If you know what you're looking at, like, it's pretty noticeable that I'm on a trip like this. So he stops in his like Sprinter van and says, yeah, I run a hostel up the road. Do you want a place to stay? Also, I can give you a ride. So I take a picture of the license plate, send it to my parents to make sure I'm not getting kidnapped. And he throw my bike in his van and he drives me up the pass to his place. And yeah, these were some of the other people that were either living with him or staying there at the time. People that I still have talked to this day. And yeah, like, just the best vibes. Like, this was particularly like the first time on the trip. It had been a while since I had just like met other adventurers. Maybe you remember from the last show, there were a couple of times early on that I met other riders. Either just one was just randomly on the street, someone else came up next to me and they were like, yeah, I'm riding through Pennsylvania too. And then another person on the Gap Trail, which there were a lot of bikers around, but one that we kind of just talked and then stuck together for a day or two. But this was the first time in a long time that I had really met up with some other adventurers. Like, they had also done bike trips. They had lived in their vans. Some of them had lived in their vans for like more than 5+ years, and maybe even a decade. Another one had done through hikes of the Appalachian Trail, the Pacific Crest Trail. So just getting to talk with them and have this sense of like, oh my God, these are people who have done or are doing what I'm doing right now. And the connection and the depth that I felt so immediately, and just the comfort and the hospitality that I got there. I was smiling nonstop. Like, I was originally planning on sleeping there and moving on the next day. And then I decided to stay the next day. And then at the end of that day, I was like, I'm still having too much fun. I'm going to stay an extra day. So I was there for like 2.5 days, I think, by the time I left. And they gave me my trail name. In the backpacking community, you're often given a trail name while you're on the trail.
Okay.
But I was alone on the road. There isn't really a biking community. There is there is, but not in the same like physical type of way. While you're on the journey, I didn't really meet anyone else. The entire trip, I met one other person that was going cross country, and we were going in opposite directions while we were in Missouri. So these kind travelers in Colorado gave me the trail name Road Flow. So that was may the flow be with you.
Wow, I like that. Road Flow. I just learned about these trail names. Someone was telling me about it with the Appalachian Trail, that you end up with a trail name, and so I'm familiar with that. I didn't realize that you needed to have a trail name for the road on your cross country trip. So that's great. Road Flow. Very good. Very good. You were alone. You talked about that. Did you ever feel lonely during the time?
I don't know. Depends on what your definition of lonely is. I wouldn't say I ever truly felt lonely, as in I was like, I'm inaccessible. I never really felt lonely, but I was alone. Like, if that makes sense, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because calling up my friends, calling up my family, that was a super easy thing. People were always available, and especially most of the time they were like, I had done so much. The course of 2 or 3 days, like enough had happened that it was worth a call home or worth a call to my friend to update them on what was going on, because things had happened over the course of a few days. So it really was never a problem, just like having some sort of social interaction if that's what I was really craving. But I do say it's like kind of not something that I regret, but if I were to do another one of these types of really long trips, I would probably put in a lot more effort from the start to try and have someone come with me. Not because I felt like it was just so terrible being alone. In a lot of ways, I was happy to be alone.
Mm-hmm.
But just because there were so many moments, good and bad, where I would have just loved to share it with someone, for someone to not just hear about what was going on, but to truly understand what was going on, to be able to call that person 10 years down the road and be like, remember when this happened and how it made us feel and what was going on and how terrible it was, or how absolutely incredible and overjoyed we were when this happened. Just having those moments, and that's part of why meeting those people at that hostel was just so magical, because there were other people who didn't necessarily understand the exact thing that was happening, but it was the closest to it that I could get while I was on my trip, that I really had people that I felt like truly understood what I was going through and understood the ins and outs of and the reality of it, whereas there's so many misconceptions about doing like trips like this in the general public. These people really understood what was going on.
Did you have any other experiences where you like took like an extra day, like where you were just having fun and you were like kind of in the flow, or was that really was that the kind of one and only? Or it sounds like that was the highlight moment of that sort of an event, but were there any other events like that?
There were other times where I definitely spent extra time, never really where I spent like a full extra day like that.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely, I think when I was in Bryce Canyon National Park, I think I spent like an extra half day there. Maybe when I was in Tacoma, California, I think I spent like an extra maybe like half day or quarter day there. Like I was originally planning on just showing up, being there for an hour and leaving. And then I was like, no, let me camp here overnight. And then in the morning, I even stayed for a couple more hours before I actually headed out for my ride for the day. So yeah, never anywhere. I don't think there was any other time where I was like, I'm staying here a full extra day just because I'm having such an incredible time.
Okay.
But definitely because I was definitely definitely an extra half day or quarter day or something like that, where I was just having a good time and I didn't necessarily have the time to spare. Like that, at that moment, I just had the time to spare, and I was having a good enough time where it was
worth it.
It was worth it and practical for me to stay. But mostly the other times when I was having a good enough time, it really just wasn't practical for me to stay where I was staying.
I asked you about if you were lonely, and it reminded me about a week or so after we had spoken back at late September. I had dinner with your parents and your sisters, and I remember it was getting dark. It was like late. It was time, like it was like time for the visit to come, and your mother at that point starts checking out her phone, and she's watching you, and she goes, he's still driving, he's still riding his bike, why isn't he stopping for the night? And it was dark on the East Coast. You were like probably a little bit, I don't know, you
2
were
hours behind at least.
You're like a little bit further, and so anyway, it was just funny that you really weren't like, there were people who were aware of where you were at all times.
Yeah, absolutely. I had people that had my location from my phone that were tracking me. My mom in particular, right? You brought up that example specifically. Like, she's the one that it's like, I don't want to put all her business out there, but got pretty annoyed, got pretty frustrated if I didn't text her back with some expedience, I would say. Yeah, which was a little frustrating to me, right? Like, one of the reasons you might think someone would do a trip like this is because they want some distance and some alone time, some ability to be by themselves.
Sure. You want to be a little more alone.
Exactly. But safety for my mom was more important on her end, and she checked in every single day, and was always checking my location, and got mad if I was biking past sunset, which I'm going to tell all these people out there, if you ever want to bike past sunset, do it. It's not bad. Have a light for your bike, have some reflectors, make sure that the cars behind you and in front of you can see you, make sure you can see the road, be safe about it, of course. But it's not unsafe by any means. In fact, some of my best especially when there's a full moon, some of my favorite memories of riding specifically are when it's a full moon and I don't even need my front bike light on. Like, it's just so bright from the moon that I can see the road. Everything's illuminated and it's just beautiful.
I'm going to try this screen share. I've been having a little difficulty with my screen share, but we're making it work. Let's see if this picture comes up. I'm thinking this is, you can see the road in front of you, but this must have been because of the fires that were going on.
No, this was just at sunset. This is just how it looked at sunset. This is the first moment I could see the mountains. For probably a day or so, I kept seeing things out in the distance, and I was like, "Oh, is that the mountains?" And then I would bike 20 miles closer and be like, "No, that was just another ridge." I was tricking myself. I was being hopeful. And then as the sun came down and made this silhouette, illuminated it from the back, I could see the peaks and the crests and the ridge.
Nice.
And I just stopped and stared in awe. And none of the pictures can do it justice. Like, this was the best picture I could get showing it, but just because of it was just dark enough that none of the cameras that I had were of that quality where they could really get a quality picture of that moment.
Right.
But it'll be in my head forever. That was one of the most stunning, beautiful things I saw my entire trip.
Very good. Yeah, no, the mountains. I remember the very first time I drove across the country and, saw the mountains, and it was just sort of like, magical because, we grew up on the East and, the mountains here are a little different than the mountains out in the Rockies. The Rockies are a big range. Yeah, very good. Well, how do you think, and my monologue, which I completely threw out the window, that's okay. We're having a good time. But the monologue was going to reflect a little bit on the fact that we have these journeys and we put them in perspective. And as time goes on, we gain more perspective about it. You're 3 months past it. You were out on the road for a little more than 3 months. So, almost as much time past the ride. How do you view the whole adventure at this point in your young life?
Yeah, actually, your brother sent me this article of someone else who had also done a bike tour, and he said, "Oh, I read this and it reminded me of you." But I read through it, and one of the things he says is like, I did a bike tour 5 years ago, so naturally I'm incessant about it. I just can't stop talking about it. And I feel in a way kind of similar, just like, because at some random moment, I can just be like, remember that? And like no one else around me remembers it. If I'm around other people, I'm like, oh, this time on my bike trip when I did this. Oh, this time on my bike trip when this happened. Oh, my other time on the bike trip when this happened. Like, it's so common still. I mean, I've still been home for less time than I was on the trip. So it's still very fresh in my head. It's still very much there. And especially now I'm working on making this video series. So I'm now actively like going through clips almost every single day and kind of reliving it. So it's still very much in my head, and still in a way like not entirely processed. I think I'm not gonna know the full true kind of extent of how much it's really going to stick with me and affect my kind of outlook on the world for still quite some time. But I think some of the immediate things are kind of just made my passion for environmentalism and conservation even stronger than it was before. I was already the type of person to be like, let me not take a plastic bag from the grocery store. Like, I'll just kind of carry everything in my arm so I don't have to use this extra piece of plastic.
Right.
Always like the the phrase that some people are uncomfortable with, if it's mellow, if it's yellow, let it mellow. If it's brown, flush it down. Like, let's save some water in the toilet and not use this extra water. Let me try not to take as long of a shower. Let me, as much as I can, not use plastic, or reuse things as much as I can before I throw them out, or always try and sell things or buy things secondhand. And I think my passion for that, and my thinking about those things, and my willingness to go into work for that type of stuff has just become stronger. I just feel more passionate about trying to find a job in conservation or environmental policy and environmental science now than I did before. Something I was already interested in, but now is just even more solidified, that it feels like this is something that I really need to invest in and put my time in.
A friend of the show, Jed, checks in and says that having a friend to reflect with can for sure bring the moment back to life. So referencing the idea that we had talked about, where, it would be nice to be able to share the experience with somebody. I do have one more picture to show you. Let's go ahead and see if it's been a little challenging getting the slideshow to work, but here we go. Tell us about this picture. I love the blue sky, the canyon. Is it somewhere in Utah?
Yeah, so this is Bryce Canyon National Park. I believe on the Navajo Loop by Wall Street. So if anyone's ever been to Wall Street at Bryce Canyon, this is exactly where I was, right by the top. Another just absolutely incredible day. I'm actually currently planning a way to get back to Bryce Canyon and hopefully do a backpacking trip through the Bryce Canyon backcountry, because I just had such a magical time. Everything was beautiful and stunning. It was definitely a bit crowded, which was frustrating at times. Couldn't really get a moment alone with nature. But this day was incredible. Just incredible hike. The people that I did get the chance to talk to were so nice. Just beautiful. Nothing like I had ever seen before. These kinds of landscapes simply just don't exist. Not just in other places in this country, but in other places around the world. Like, there are very, very few places where things that even look remotely like this exist. Yeah. Like, my mind goes to like Argentina or Chile, that also have like similar kind of alpine deserts. But this was just so magical, so ancient. You can just see how old this is and how long the water and the snow and the rivers and the creeks have been carving out this canyon and these gorges. Just stunningly beautiful. And for a fun note, I think it was either on this day or the next day. On this day, I met the person, and then I think on the day after this, I ran into them again on a different trail, and was like, if we're going to run into each other like this, someone's telling us to talk. So I talked to him, and he is the director of the film Hoop Dreams.
Okay.
So if anyone knows that famous film Hoop Dreams from the 90s, I met the director, the writer and director, Frederick Marks.
Awesome. Yeah. So when your original plan was that you were going to go to Germany and teach English.
Yes.
You're fluent in German, so it seemed like a natural fit for you. The pandemic came along and put a hold on that whole idea, and then of course you decided to take the bike ride. You had the time. You thought, let's just go do it. What's in the future of Andrew Hesbacher? What do you see happening going forward?
So I'm still planning on moving to Germany. That job is deferred to this coming fall. So fingers crossed that the vaccine rollout goes as is being planned. In fact, it's currently ahead of schedule from President Biden's original goal of 100 million doses in the first 100 days. Already ahead of that plan. So I'm really hoping that that the rollout just continues to go well, and that as many people, including myself, will be vaccinated by the summer, that I'll be able to, I and everyone else that wants to participate in this program and move to Germany and teach English gets the chance to. But in the meantime, I'm actually planning some trips. I'm currently in the process of planning a couple of backpacking trips specifically. I don't think a bike trip is in the cards for this year. Just because I did it last year and I kind of want to try something new, try some other experiences. Right. And one of the things that in the moments that I did get to do hiking on my trip, they're just different speeds. at the level that when you're walking, you get to see the littlest things, the leaf that
Yeah.
looks interesting, the caterpillar that's like crawling along that branch, even other wildlife that's just in the distance. You're moving so fast while you're on a bike that you just don't notice these things. But as you're walking along at 3 miles an hour or less, you just start to notice so much more, and there's a bit more connection that I'm planning a couple of longer backpacking trips that I can hopefully make happen in the coming months.
You mentioned, Andrew, that you have some kind of a film project. You collected a lot of video of your trip, and you had a drone when we spoke. Did the drone survive the trip?
The drone survived the trip. So it broke while I was in Kansas. There was some sort of problem with the propellers that it broke, and I had to send it in to like the DJI like repairment center. Fortunately, I did purchase insurance for the drone when I bought it.
Okay.
So I sent it into that center, and everything got figured out, and I got the replacement sent back to me. And then it worked for the rest of the trip, and I didn't have any more problems with it. So yeah, got a lot of incredible video and pictures.
On your Instagram account, and if you want to connect with Andrew, Doodle Bob Lives is his handle. Go ahead and follow his next adventures there. And but you know, you had a picture of like on your Instagram page of you riding down the road, and the drone obviously had to be flying behind you. How do you fly the drone and ride your bicycle at the same time? Because there's some kind of controls. I'm trying to figure out how you did that picture.
Very carefully is the answer I give you. I never did that when I didn't feel like I was in a safe place to do it.
Okay.
So the only times I ever did it when I was on like a separated trail, right, where I was, maybe there were other people around, but there was enough distance between us that like I was biking at maybe half the speed, if not less than what I normally would. Controlling it, like it would kind of the controller kind of like sat on my handlebar.
Okay.
And I kind of just like held the handlebar with like my fingers here, and kind of just like finagled the drone as much as I could, while still like obviously first priority is like keeping myself safe.
Right.
But yeah, the only other times I ever did that was when I was on like just a super open back road where there weren't any cars coming by. And yeah, I was able to get some of the pictures in it, and it looks beautiful.
How often did you fly the drone? Would you bring it out like every couple of days, or did you do it more often than that or less often than that?
Kind of just depended on where I was. Like in Kansas, I mean, I had some drone problems anyway, but in Kansas, the drone won't be able to distinguish, like the drone footage wouldn't allow you to distinguish like central Kansas from western Kansas from eastern Kansas. They all kind of look relatively the same.
Not because it's flat, because it's rolling hills.
Yes, but you wouldn't be able to, unless you're from the area, you really just wouldn't be able to tell exactly where you at, or eastern Colorado. I could show you footage of eastern Colorado and tell you it's Kansas, and no one would know the wiser.
Sure.
Yeah, so at moments like that, I definitely did not pull it out every day. I was like, it's not worth it. There isn't anything special about this. Not anything special. There isn't anything just new or interesting that the footage that I already have isn't bringing to this moment. But then at times when there was just so much stuff that I wanted to film, I pulled it out 3 or 4 times a day.
So what are you envisioning with your film project that is it going to be kind of the story in pictures, and you're going to add some animation or some voiceovers to describe it? I mean, what are you picturing?
So it's going to be like a full vlog production. Like I have a lot of footage and video. It's already coming along. I can't show anything on here. I actually really wanted to, but I actually have like music is really important to me. So I actually purchased like a music subscription from like a licensing company to be able to use like really quality music for the project.
Sure.
Because that's kind of how I always had music in my ears. That's kind of how I like experience and in a lot of ways remember the trip. A song will come on and I'm like, oh my God, this song makes me think of Kansas. So I can't show the video because there's copyrighted music in it that the license that I have doesn't cover me to be able to play it here, and I don't want to get in trouble before I've even released any of the material. But it's like the friends that I had a friend that was like, I just cried after watching the first episode, like draft that I showed them, trying to look for feedback. So yeah, I think it's pretty powerful. I'm nowhere near finished, but the whole thing, but I'm going to hopefully start releasing video. My goal is like mid-March.
All right.
It is to start putting out at least the first episode, and then I'd probably be releasing an episode weekly. And I'm not exactly certain how many videos I'll have, just because I really have not made it that too far into the editing process yet. Because I'm sure you know, as someone who's worked with video before, like and other people out there, editing is a arduous and long process. Like it can easily take 3 hours to get 30 seconds of well-edited video.
Yeah.
And that's if you already know what you're doing and getting yourself through the video editing software. And sometimes I don't know what I'm doing, so I have to sit there and Google and be like, how do I time remap this thing so it doesn't look like crap?
Right.
So it's coming along, but yeah, it's in my own personal humble opinion, it's some quality stuff, and I think everyone could both get something out of it and enjoy watching it. And if you just follow me on Instagram there at DoodleBobLives, all those details are going to be coming out pretty soon. I haven't posted too frequently recently on my Instagram, but now that I'm planning on starting to release some video content, the posting is going to start coming back up pretty soon. And I'll be posting pretty regularly every day, if not every other day, including information about when new videos are coming out and where on YouTube you can find them.
Maybe when the project is rolling out, we can have you back one more time and you can kind of talk about the project and we can show some little clips or something like that. We'll figure that out, if the licensing works, but I would love to, see that and share some of that if it works for you. So I throw that out there as an opportunity. Let's go ahead and wrap up by sharing one last picture. This is obviously when you got to the other ocean.
Yes, this is at the other ocean. This is in San Diego or just near San Diego. My little sister and I were kind of just exploring this cove. And I mean, I'm a daring dude, obviously, as someone who did this trip, that I was like, let me just pull up my pants and wade through this water and climb on some rocks. And my sister snapped this pic from behind.
Nice.
Just having a lot of fun, like exploring. That was one of the things I don't want to say learned, kind of more just like exercise, that feeling and skill of exploration and adventure. It is in a lot of ways a skill that needs to be like learned and exercised to know like what's safe and what's doable, but also that sometimes you just got to go and do it, and it's worth getting a little dirty or wet to have some fun and to get some memories.
You did this trip last year. The pandemic was, various degrees of concern. Did you feel that it slowed you down or inhibited you in any way? And what would you say to, someone who is a person who is maybe like thinking of doing an adventure, but is going to talk themselves out of it because they are being practical? What would you advise people who are thinking of doing something fun and adventurous in their life?
So kind of the first part where you said if it like inhibited me in any way, depends on your perspective. I don't think it necessarily inhibited me. It just brought me new perspectives, new information, new realizations about myself and what I'm interested in and what my passions are. And then kind of in the same vein is I would say to anyone who's interested in doing a trip like this, do it, right? If you're interested in it, there's a reason that you're naturally like, and you see the other people on YouTube who put out their videos like this, you see the online content, you see the pictures of these far away natural places that just like fill you with awe, right? That's what inspired this trip. I was 13 years old on the internet and saw some pictures of like Bryce Canyon National Park and was like, I'm going to see that one day and I'm going to go there. And that's what happened. Like I got the opportunity, I had the time and the resources to make it happen. And I took my shot, and I will never, never regret it. And that's what I would recommend to anyone. If you have the time, the resources, the opportunity to make it happen, and you're interested in making it happen, like there's a reason you're interested in it, right? And if you kind of just let yourself let that interest grow instead of talking yourself out of it, because you can talk yourself out of anything, right?
Yeah.
Like you can talk yourself out of anything. There are always reasons not to do something, but the reasons to do something you often won't learn until you all have already started doing it.
Yeah, no, that's great advice, Andrew. I really appreciate the fact that you, you went and did this trip, you lived out your dream, and then you were willing to, and you saw it through. And there was a few, little hiccups and setbacks, broken equipment early on. Any one of those things could have derailed you, could have, stopped you from doing it, but you just figured it out along the way. So you're to be congratulated, and you're an inspiration. So thank you for coming here and sharing it. I would love to, again, in a couple months after your video piece is together, maybe we can figure out how to share some of that here and tell that part of the story. But anyway, thank you so much. Last word for anybody, again, just wanting to do something fun in their life.
Yeah, get out there and do it. I mean, that's the advice that everyone says, right? Don't ask for permission. Don't say, is this going to work? Like, of course, ask yourself about like safety and downsides, and make sure it's right for you at like a base level, of course. But once those like kind of minimal questions are out of the way, get out there and do it. There is no other way. Like that's my mentality now, is like, I have the opportunity to make something I want to do happen. I need to make it happen, or else it's not going to happen. So just get out there and do it.
Very good. Well, thank you, Andrew. We appreciate your joining us this morning. And thanks for taking over the show at the beginning when I had some technical difficulties.
Of course, no
got
problem.
your own show in the future, I can tell. All right,
Thank
Andrew.
you, yeah.
Take care.
You too.
Wow, that was great. And thank you to Andrew for sharing his story, for helping out with the American Gumption show. This was a little different show. I never did the monologue. That's okay. It's really the same thing. The journey is once you start and commit to something, you just see it through. So we had Andrew scheduled, and he just filled in and took the show over, and we had a great conversation, and I loved sharing the pictures that he had. So that's it. We're going to wrap up and get out of here. Tomorrow I have Jay Toops, who's going to join us, and he has an idea for turning waste carbons into alcohol, cleaner, stronger alcohol fuels than what some of the fuels that we're currently using. And it could be a great way to environmentally enhance what we're doing, because of the, getting rid of the garbage, and then also producing fuels that would work right in our current system. So we don't have to necessarily go right to other renewable energies. We have an opportunity to do it, and we'll tune in tomorrow for Jay's story. Next week, Amy Gray Cunningham is joining us on Tuesday, Nicole Nassif on Wednesday, and Stacy Lamar King comes back one more time, and he is going to talk about being a project management professional on Thursday. Alrighty, so that's it. We will see you all tomorrow. Have a great rest of your day. Let's see, we got Jed checking back in with, here we go. He just says, he says it was an awesome experience. So yeah, awesome experience that Andrew shared, and we enjoyed him sharing the story. Alrighty, that's it, everybody. Have a great rest of your day. I will see you all tomorrow.